Welcome to You Make It Happen, the show that discusses trauma healing, travel, food, and everything in between. I'm your host, Missy. Thank you all so much for being here. And if it's worth it to you, please rate the podcast 5 stars on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening. Today, we're talking about how self-love relates to solo travel. I previously told you guys I would tell you about the reason behind the title of the podcast, and in this episode, I'm going to get into it. It's a little dark, and I will give you a trigger warning before I start it. Also, what to pack when traveling on a budget. This episode is going to be travel tip heavy, I promised, and here it is. And a new recipe I recently tried and loved. I also have a couple of excellent reading recommendations, so strap in and stay tuned. So I promised y'all in the first episode the reason behind the title of the podcast, and here it is. Trigger warning, trigger warning. This tale includes suicidal ideation. So, suitable pause. All right, if you don't want to listen to this, you can tune it out or shut it off. When I was 16, I was well over 300 pounds, 330, something like that. I wouldn't weigh myself, so I don't know. I didn't know it at the time, but I felt incredibly isolated, just miserable, unlovable. I just couldn't put words to that. I knew I was unhappy. As a result, I was suicidal for, I don't even remember how long it was. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't have the emotional language or understanding of what I was feeling. I just felt incredibly alone with no end in sight, and I was desperate to end it. So one day I was driving to work, and I decided that today was that day. Life was no longer worth living. I decided I was just going to kill myself on the way to work by driving off the road wherever would accomplish the job quickly and relatively painlessly. And I was sobbing, and I was looking for a place to run my car off the road. I was trying to figure out how to do that without hurting anybody else, but effectively and efficiently killing myself. And it was in that moment that the Mariah Carey song Make It Happen came on the radio. So that's back when we actually listened to the radio. This is in the 90s. All right, so I had listened to this song maybe 100 times before, maybe more than that. I've listened to it a lot before that, because ever since I was a little girl, I was a huge fan of Mariah. But this time, when this particular song came on, it felt like the universe was speaking to me and intervening. In one of the first parts of the song, she sings about how she cried herself to sleep. She didn't know if she was going to make it to see the next day, but also she never knew what was going to happen the next day either. So as I was looking for a way to end it, racked with sobs, feeling hopeless, that song came on. And it just felt like the universe was saying to me, no, you can do it. You can make it through this. And at that time, it's the only thing that stopped me. And I'd heard it so many times before, but it was in that moment that the lyrics really spoke to me. And at the time, I had trust and faith in Mariah and didn't believe in the universe or a path or spirituality as I do now. But back then, what I heard was my idol telling me that I can save myself. I guess it would have been more appropriate if the song Hero played, but this song, it resonated. And that song saved my life. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it literally saved my life. If I hadn't found a place to kill myself or successfully run the car off the road, my backup plan was my dad's shotgun. I was absolutely serious. Now, in my 40s, with all the work I've done on myself, I know, absolutely know, the universe was speaking to me through my idol, through Mariah, the one person I loved and trusted, telling me that there were better times ahead. I felt an odd sense of reassurance and calm and a weird feeling of knowing wash over me. I realized that I was at one of the darkest times in my life, but I knew in that moment that it didn't mean it would be that way forever. I laugh, but it's not funny. You know what I mean? I'm just so grateful now that the song came on and stopped me, because I have a life that I love and find joy and gratitude in every day. I'm grateful for each day that I'm breathing without assistance, walking on my own, and alive to see what the day brings. Even on the days I feel like shit, or don't feel like getting out of bed, or I'm just having a shit day, I try to remember that I'm just grateful to be alive. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I try. So I touched on in episode 1, but didn't get very far into it, how trauma recovery relates to solo travel. So I'm going to expound upon this a little bit. In the last episode, we discussed how trauma can have a lot to do with the courage and vulnerability to travel alone, specifically solo travel. So I get a lot of comments and compliments from friends and family, acquaintances, anybody that I talk to about it for that matter, about how I travel alone, especially for weeks at a time. And let's be clear here, it's not like I'm some massive loner that doesn't want any human contact. I'm an introvert, but I'm an extroverted introvert, and I'm incredibly outgoing and chatty when I'm peopling. When I'm not peopling, so to speak, I do renew my energy through downtime being alone and through quality time with friends. So a lot of hard work and a lot of therapy, let's be honest about that, has given me a lot more shame resilience, which has led to a deeper well of resilience in general. It relates in so many ways. I had a trauma therapist, one of 3 I was seeing in 2020 for a series of traumas I had recently gone through, which I may get into in another episode. And it relates to what I mentioned happened in the last episode. So I started seeing him since he specifically worked with law enforcement and he was trained in EMDR. EMDR, if you're not familiar with it, it is invaluable, and I plan to talk about it in a future episode in more depth. But for now, I'll just tell you one of the biggest takeaways I had from working with him was about shame resilience. He taught me that shame resilience can be built by having new experiences. And when he told me to try new things, I thought, sure, it's good use of my time and sounds like fun. But he elaborated that it was not just for fun, but new experiences were great at building shame resilience and resilience in general. So the more new experiences and getting out of your comfort zone, the better equipped to handle the unexpected in life you are. And I found this to be true. He also strongly suggested yoga as my exercise of choice, and he was so right about that as well. Connecting to my body, breath, and spirit helped with my anxiety and outlook on life overall. So doing the work isn't for everyone. And hey, I get it. I was that person who had no interest or inclination to go to therapy, let alone to pick up a book on how to better myself. This shit is super hard, and you have to be incredibly brave to do it, which isn't for everybody. More and more people are taking that leap and getting into their own shit, which is amazing. And still, many more choose not even to ever open themselves up to love, which means never getting hurt. So our willingness and depth of vulnerability is our single best measure of courage, according to Dr. Brené Brown, and I enthusiastically agree. And vulnerability is so fucking hard. Being brave and telling someone I love you first, so fucking hard. But it's the best thing we can do, and the bravest thing we can do is be vulnerable and open ourselves up to love and hurt, because one doesn't come without the other. So if you're listening and got to this episode and you're thinking, fuck that, I'm not doing that work, I don't blame you. This shit is not for the faint of heart. It's hard work, and looking at yourself, looking at what needs to be healed to be happier, to live a more joyful life, love more, and lean into gratitude. It's just incredibly courageous, because again, vulnerability is courageous. Our single best measure of courage is vulnerability. So if you're here for it, then good goddamn job. I am here with you, and living in the arena is not easy. If you're wondering about the arena, search Brené Brown Arena. Before I started my personal work on myself, I had little self-confidence, and I was scared every time I traveled alone. So reminder, when I say work, I mean my trauma recovery, my healing work, my going from anxious to earn secure attachment, the work that everybody is either doing or not doing on themselves. Doing the work, as Sabrina Zohar says. I just love her podcast, Do the Work, because that's really it. Do the fucking work. She's one of the people that inspired me to make this podcast, but I digress. ADHD squirrel. I'm off on another path. Whee! Anyway, returning to the subject of how trauma healing relates to being able to travel solo, it comes down to learning how to love myself. So I've learned to genuinely adore myself, appreciate myself, thank my body, and be with myself on a daily basis. And that was not the case before doing my work. So now when I'm traveling, I feel like the best version of myself, because when traveling, I'm fully expressing who I am. International travel is one of my passions because it combines my love of lifelong learning and exploring new places, cultures, people, and let's not forget new food. It's just one of the ways that I find myself being fulfilled in life, and I find a deep sense of gratitude for the ability to travel, having learned how to travel on a low budget, and I mean very low. So all this travel, mostly solo, and the first time I ever did it, was I scared? Of course I was scared. You bet your ass I was scared. So how did I routinely get to traveling once or twice a year internationally, solo and confidently so? All right, this is kind of a windy, bumpy path, but I got the ADHD, so you're gonna have to bear with me here. How you get from plenty of trauma and self-loathing to self-love, confidence, and enjoyable travel. Well, that's years and years of work. And at first when I started, I just had to throw myself into it. I was so anxious, and I just fucking did it anyway. Because I hit my mid-20s and I decided that if I was going to wait to feel comfortable for someone else to be there and hold my hand, I might never travel. And I'm really glad that I made that leap and forced myself out. Looking back, if I could do it over, I would. I obviously have plenty of regrets and mistakes in my life, but not as it concerns travel. I'm glad I forced myself out of my shell. I was more of an introvert in my 20s, and I just didn't have a whole lot of friends. And not only did I not love myself, but I didn't even like myself. Although, if you had asked me at the time, I would have said, yeah, to the question, do you love yourself? Not liking myself is an understatement. There was a lot of self-loathing going on in my 20s. Now, I want to be clear here and state, while traveling solo can be amazing and liberating and fun, learning how to love yourself is even more important. We still need connection with other humans. Dr. Brown talks about this as well in most of, if not all of her books, in how we're neurobiologically hardwired for connection. The whole sentiment of, I don't need anybody and I'm just going to go it alone, and I don't need anybody to be happy. That's bullshit. Even the deepest, hardcore introvert needs other humans to survive. So I'm not saying life is best or travel is best alone. Not at all. Just to be clear about that. All right, so let's delve a little further into how to be with yourself and how to love yourself. By the way, I'm not saying that this is going to be easy. Just like in the last episode, this is not me telling you how to do this for you either. This is me saying talk to a mental health professional if you can. And here's what worked for me. Someone who's in the trenches with you doing her work. This someone who has gone from anxious to earned secure attachment. I mentioned in the last episode, but I didn't get the opportunity to explain it, and I've said it a few times here. So what is earned secure attachment? Presuming you know the basics about attachment style for just a moment, earned secure is exactly what it sounds like. You do the work on yourself, some of which is purging negativity, DBT skills, challenging your thoughts, inner child work, and you can go from anxious, avoidant, or any insecure attachment style to the only secure attachment style. Secure. Aptly named. So when you have to earn your way there and it's not your default, it's called earned secure. So if you're listening to this and you identify as anxious as your default, baby, I was you. I had all the abandonment, rejection thoughts, triggers, and insecurities about being lovable, or rather unlovable. It took years of lots of hard work, both in and out of therapy, to get to where I'm at today. And spoiler, for all of you looking for a quick fix, or at least a permanent solution, there isn't one. I, like all former anxious attachers, still get triggered. Now I just have better skills to handle it when I am. I self-soothe, I self-validate, I practice my tools and skills, and I don't rely on or seek external validation when I'm triggered with my own insecurities, because that's my shit to work on and work through. So that brings up my motto, and why it's my motto: work your shit out, not on other people, because your pain, your unresolved traumas, your childhood shit, it's just that. It is yours. It is fucking yours. We see people working their shit out and taking their pain out on other people every day. You see people yelling at other people they don't even know, people screaming at people in traffic, people shooting people for cutting them off in traffic. I mean, talk about some unresolved trauma. People are suffering because they don't know what to do or how to process, and therefore they victimize others. This is not okay. Work your shit out, not on other people. Another spoiler alert: anxiety never goes away. But, we can get better and better about handling it and how to regulate ourselves and our nervous systems when we're triggered. And we are going to get triggered, whether you're anxious or any other insecure attachment style, or that was just your default. Even secure people get triggered. So for me, the answer is a combination of therapy, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, which I don't do enough, let's be honest, inner child work, self-validation, DBT practices, exercise, pickleball in particular. I know y'all listening to this know what I'm talking about. Some of my pickleball friends. Journaling, digging deep into discomfort, getting comfortable being uncomfortable, which, let's face it, I'm not comfortable being uncomfortable. I've just gotten used to doing it, and thereby creating shame resilience. And there's probably a ton more, but I know that this is a lot. This is a lot to take in already. So, what can you do to get started down the path of healing? And like I said, that's going to be very individual. But here are some ideas of how to at least get started, because self-love, for me, was the key to thoroughly enjoying solo travel. Start with an ounce of self-compassion, even if it's just an ounce. And for those listening who can't get into therapy for one reason or another, or just for those who want to do some more work outside of therapy, here comes your reading recommendation for this episode. I'm going to give you 2 recommendations for 2 different places on different healing timelines. So on a related side note, I'm going to have an episode in the future about how to find a good therapist. Look for that in the coming weeks and months. And so by reading, I also mean you can be listening to these books on audiobook. A lot of them are free from your local library. Sometimes there's a wait, and sometimes you might get lucky and get a copy right away. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Oh, hey, that's my inner 6-year-old making an appearance when I say shit like that. All right, getting back to it. So if you haven't started out and you're wondering what should you be doing to work on yourself, great job. You started listening to a trauma healing traveling foodie podcast. Good place to start. For next steps, I would start with a gentle, easy, non-threatening read to start on your path to self-improvement and trauma healing. So reading recommendation number 1. One of my baseline recommendations is usually and almost always Brené Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection. It's an amazing book and it's a great place to start. I recommend this book because of the impact it had on me after first reading it. The material is just simply revelational. If you aren't familiar with Dr. Brown's work, she's a grounded theory researcher who studies shame and vulnerability. She's entirely relatable. She actually has a Netflix special I mentioned in episode 1. So if books aren't your thing, A, I'd encourage you to rethink that because you need to read to expand your knowledge base. And B, check out the Netflix special first then. Maybe work your way up to her best-selling books. And reading recommendation 2. If you're a little bit further into your healing path and you've spent time in therapy, or if this just sounds like it's more on your level, I recommend reading Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. This book is phenomenal and also full of revelational material. I had heard of the concept of talking to yourself like you would your best friend, but Dr. Neff takes it many, many steps further and shows you just how critical it is to be as kind and gentle with yourself as you would with the people you love the most. So let's take a step back from the duality behind the title of this show and get into some fun shit. Travel advice. Oh yeah. Let's talk packing. Packing for your trip. Are you thinking about checked? Are you thinking about carry-on? Are you thinking about packing light? Or are you thinking about packing everything under the sun that you might need? So how to pack for a trip? Well, that depends on a lot of factors, as you might imagine. How long of a trip? How many people are traveling? Obviously, you're only packing for yourself if you're going on a solo trip, but are you bringing anybody any gifts? Are you visiting family? Are you visiting friends? Do you need to save room to bring stuff to other people? Or do you want to just save room to bring shit home? For me, it's the latter. I usually want to bring stuff home. So a big part of packing for me is what airlines I'm going to be flying with, sometimes multiple, sometimes singular. If I'm going to be flying on Ryanair, for example, which is a low-cost airline in Europe, I have to make sure I'm taking my international size carry-on, which is 19 inches in length. And in my experience, the lower budget airlines are the strictest with their baggage allowances. So just like US airlines, they now charge a separate fee for a carry-on, not a personal item. That's usually the thing that fits under the seat in front of you. Most of the airlines in the US do now charge that also. So also be careful here because airlines in the US now also seem to be getting stricter with their size allowances, checking weight, baggage size, etc. Just pro tip. I'm trying to be cognizant of not using the word America because America encompasses North America, South America, Central America, and all of these, they're 2 entirely different continents, okay? And they're not only hundreds of different countries, I think, who knows, close to 100 or so. Anyway, but entirely different continents, and I've read multiple articles on travel that indicate that South Americans, as well as North Americans from different countries other than the US, pretty much hate the fact that all of the United States citizens universally call themselves Americans, because we're not the only Americans there are. There's, everybody else. So I'm trying to be more cognizant of using the more specific identifiers like the United States citizens or US instead of just saying America or Americans, because that can be offensive to people in other countries in the Americas. So getting back to carry-on, I'm going to address checked luggage in a minute. Carry-on is usually better for a few reasons. Number 1, virtually no chance of the airline losing your luggage. And I say virtually because technically they can make you check that shit at the gate, and then you can do that willingly, or they could, make you check it, and then they could lose that too, which let's hope that just doesn't happen. So carry-on is much lighter and easier to haul around with you, and you have to haul all of your shit with you everywhere you go, unless you're paying somebody to haul it for you, which I'm not. If all your belongings weigh a lot, you're going to be hauling heavier shit. The more you pack, the heavier your bags get. Checked luggage is bigger. We all know that. And the more shit you haul around with you, the more physically straining it's going to be. So, example, let's say you're going around Europe for a week or 2 or even 3. Sometimes backpacking is effective in that scenario, but let's say you're not backpacking and you just take your carry-on or checked luggage, and you have to haul that shit from the plane through the airport. Some airports are huge, by the way. Then from the airport to the train, which is often quite a walk, and then from your train or metro to your accommodations. Maybe that's 5 blocks, maybe it's 5 kilometers. That's a lot of hauling your shit. And sometimes you have to lift it up and haul it over cobblestone roads, or lift it and carry it over muddy sections of a gravel road. And just any other scenario you can imagine. Just the easier it is to pick up your luggage, the more convenient it's going to be. I can't tell you how many staircases out of public transit stations across Europe that I've had to haul my carry-on up or down multiple flights of stairs, because if you're looking to save money and travel on a budget, which I always am, then you better be able to haul your shit. And public transportation is usually the cheapest. So it's taken me about 20 years of traveling, mostly solo and primarily to Europe, learning to pack very, very light. So this is my low-budget insider secret traveling tip. Travel tip number 1. Stick with the carry-on. Packing light is the way to go. Forgo the checked luggage. Learn how to pack light, which I will help you guys with. Personally, I don't like a big backpack because I have chronic back injuries and I can't physically haul that for very long anymore. I usually do take a normal size backpack or handbag as my small personal item, but not a full backpacking backpack. I know that's a lot of the word backpack, but here we are. So let's talk about the type of carry-on. That's obviously going to be specific to you, but I did a lot of research before I committed to a nicer carry-on, and I've been really happy with my purchase over the last, about 14-ish years, I'd say. I got a hard-sided Delsey. I ended up buying it on Amazon. It's 19 inches, so the international size carry-on is met. And it's one of those things that you get what you pay for. And I've been told and investigated that Briggs & Riley is apparently the best brand, but their hard-sided stuff is upwards of $500-$600, and that is just not in my budget. If it's in yours, great. I'm jealous. Feel free to send me one for free. Love you. Love it. Thank you. Had a friend say Monos is good, but I haven't actually tried them. They do have great reviews. I would love to go with them, but they're also a little bit pricey. So I go with a spinner for a few reasons, because when you're going from place to place, you're going to be spending a lot of time walking through airports and just walking in general. And I have found a spinner to be absolutely invaluable. Dragging your shit just takes a lot more physical strength and it's more of a pain. So travel tip number 2, pack light. It's not just for the savings of only having a carry-on financially, but also for the sheer pain in the ass that it is to haul your shit around. I have made the mistake of not packing light in the past, and oh my god, once I picked up a friend's makeup bag, and it was a travel makeup bag, mind you, and it was so heavy. It was big and bulky and must have weighed at least 5 pounds, and that's just the makeup bag. She had her toiletries in there too, but it was just way too much. I mean, I don't wear a ton of makeup most of the time, but I do like it occasionally. And I actually do usually pack some bare minimum basics and some, neutral palette kind of things for when I'm traveling. It's nice for nights out, dinner dates with friends, occasional parties, whatever. So I own my fair share of makeup, but a 5-pound bag just for traveling, this would have almost certainly have to go in a checked bag. So for me, checking just isn't a realistic option. And more power to the people that can afford to check and love to check and have that. I can't, and I'm sure as hell not able to pay people to haul around my shit either. So even if I had the money to check, I wouldn't, because I've got nobody to carry it for me. So between hopping international flights every few days on a European trip and hauling my shit from train platform to airport to stairs to up and down the metro, yeah, no, that fucking just isn't gonna fly. Oh yeah, I did that cheesy pun all on my own. You guys like it. I love it. Anyway, it's me. Here's me. So travel tip number 3, bring stuff to discard. It's really helpful for me. I have found over the years packing that you can pack lighter when you're going home And you can bring like bras or socks or shoes or whatever, flip-flops, stuff that you are almost done with, about to throw away anyway, stuff that's worn out. And I take it traveling with me. And then I'm like, okay, this is going to go in the trash because then I'll have some extra space. And so it's the stuff that I know I'm about to toss out. I just leave it in my room for anybody else who wants it, or give it to my host or whatever, being the accommodation situation. It's actually benefited me multiple times from other fellow travelers leaving their stuff behind that they couldn't take with them or didn't want to take with them. Think about Hawaii specifically. I love Hawaii. I don't go super often because it's not cheap, but I found large bottles of sunscreen, bug spray, after sun care, etc., like left in an Airbnb or whatever, VRBO. I'm like, hey, this is awesome because then I can use this stuff and I'm not going to take it with me because it's full-size containers and it's just nice to have. And so sometimes passing on stuff can be kind of paying it forward. So I hope to pass my shit on to the next hopefully lucky travelers that appreciate my stuff as well. All right, a quick switcheroo to a recipe I recently tried and loved. It was maybe viral, I'm not sure. These protein pancakes on Facebook made of blended cottage cheese, and I know that has been viral, but this recipe, I don't know. It is delicious. Protein pancakes without any protein powder that don't taste like chalk. Yes, that does sound good. And they looked kind of questionable, but I was like, all right, let's give it a shot. And so I made them for kids. Everybody has loved them so far. Recipe coming at ya. 1 cup oats, either oat flour or just 1 cup of oats because you're going to blend it anyway. 1 cup of cottage cheese, 1 egg. I put it in a list blender for flavor. You can use sweetener or vanilla or whatever you want. And then as I'm cooking them, I slice up strawberries and chocolate chips and put that in it as they cook. It also works with blueberries. These are protein packed, pretty healthy, no gross protein powder taste, and delicious pancakes. You're welcome. So here in this episode, I didn't quite have enough time to delve further into those DBT techniques I talked about briefly and mentioned in episode 1, but don't worry, I'm going to be expounding upon that in a future episode, not too far off. I don't want to name the episode in case I can't get my shit together in order enough to have it in the next episode, but I'm planning the next episode for that. And I'm also going to get into how to find a good enough therapist. I hear you. I got your messages. I appreciate the outpouring of feedback. I got enough requests for, okay, but how do we find a good therapist? And can you make this an entire episode? I can, and I have, and it's coming. So just know that I hear you guys. I'm listening to your recommendations and suggestions and requests for episodes, so keep sending them. And I get to as much as I can replying. I can't reply to everything, obviously. Those of you who haven't gotten replies know that, but I'm doing the best I can. I really appreciate the outpouring of support, and the overwhelming positive response has just been awesome. Thank you guys so much. You can reach me on social media at missy.traveler on TikTok or You Make It Happen podcast on Facebook. I do take messages and requests. I get to as many as I possibly can. I can't get to them all. And if you want to support the podcast and you want me to be able to keep doing this and keep bringing you episodes and keep responding to your requests for specific type of episodes, please, please, please rate the podcast. Give it 5 stars if you think it's worth it on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to this podcast, because that's how I'm able to stay doing this. I appreciate you so much more than you know. I am so grateful. Every time you leave a review, just the stars, you can write something if you want, but you can just leave the star review. It helps me so much. It helps me get sponsorships, and it helps me be able to do this in the future. And as always, work your shit out, not on other people. Thank you so much for listening.